He said, "Imagine if we got married." And his smile felt too real. I've replayed that night in my head so many times that it feels less like a memory and more like a dream I can't wake from. Sometimes it comes back in fragments. His laugh echoing in the dimly lit room, the way his hand brushed mine when he passed me another drink, the lopsided grin he wore when he said the words that changed everything. Imagine if we got married. He said it like a joke, like it was nothing more than another throwaway thought in a long night of drinking and talking. But I remember the way his eyes held on to mine just a little too long, the way his smile felt too real to be a joke. And in that split second, something inside me shifted. But let me back up, because nothing ever begins with a single sentence. I met him my first year of college, though I had seen him around before. He was the kind of guy who drew people in without trying. Not because he was loud or flashy, but because he seemed so effortlessly himself. He had this calm confidence that made you want to lean closer, to listen, to stay in his orbit for just a little longer. His name was Ryan. The first time we really talked, it was about music. He was sitting on the campus lawn with a guitar, strumming casually like the world didn't exist around him. I sat nearby, pretending to read but actually listening, and when he caught me humming along under my breath, he laughed. That was it. That was how it started. An awkward smile, a laugh, and then hours of conversation that felt like minutes. Over the years, our friendship grew into something I couldn't quite name. We hung out almost every day, late-night study sessions, cheap takeout dinners, walking home together after parties. To everyone else, we were just close friends. To me, it was something else. Something I didn't have the courage to say out loud. Because Ryan wasn't like me. He dated girls. He joked about his hookups. He talked about his crushes with me like I was just one of the guys, someone safe to confide in. And I played my role perfectly. I nodded, I teased, I offered advice. All the while, my chest ached with words I couldn't say. Then there was that night. We had been drinking, nothing wild, just a few beers in his apartment after a long week. The conversation meandered the way it always did with him, flowing from classes to music to random half-serious, half-sarcastic talks about life. At some point, the topic of relationships came up. He was in between girlfriends, and I was always single. He asked me once why I never dated, and I deflected with a joke. But that night, he pushed a little. You ever think about it? Like, really think about who you'd want? I shrugged, trying to keep my voice steady. Sometimes. He tilted his head, studying me the way he did when he was trying to figure something out. Then he leaned back, grinning. Imagine if we got married. I laughed at first because what else could I do? But then he smiled, really smiled, and it didn't feel like a joke anymore. It felt like a glimpse into something I wasn't supposed to see, like he had opened a door I didn't know existed. My heart hammered in my chest, and for a moment, the room felt impossibly small. I wanted to ask him what he meant. I wanted to tell him that I'd imagined it 1,000 times already, in the quiet moments when no one could see me. I wanted to tell him that the thought of marrying him wasn't funny. It was the most real, most terrifying, most beautiful dream I had. But instead, I just laughed again, softer this time, and he let the conversation drift away. Still, that moment lodged itself inside me, and it didn't leave. After that night, everything felt different. Not outwardly. Our friendship looked the same to anyone watching. But inside me, every glance, every touch, every shared silence seemed charged with new meaning. I kept telling myself not to read into it. He was just being Ryan. He teased, he joked, he smiled that smile that could mean everything or nothing at all. But it was too late. The idea had taken root. And once you imagine something like that, you can't go back to not imagining it. There were times when I caught him looking at me, and my chest would tighten. There were moments when our shoulders brushed, when his hand lingered just a second too long on mine, and I'd wonder if he felt it too. But then he'd mention some girl, or I'd see him flirting at a party, and the hope in me would crumble. It was like living on a fault line, never knowing when the ground would steady and when it would split beneath me. The worst part wasn't the longing. It was the not knowing. Did he mean it? Did he feel it? Was that smile real? Or was it just another one of his easy, thoughtless grins that he gave to everyone? I told myself I could live with the uncertainty. That friendship was enough. That it was better to have him in my life this way than to risk losing him by asking for more. But the truth? That night had changed me. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't pretend it hadn't. Because once someone says, "Imagine if we got married," and smiles like they mean it, you can't stop imagining. I used to think the hardest part of wanting him was the silence. The way my feelings sat in my chest like a weight I could never put down. But after that night, the hardest part was the noise. The noise of my own thoughts, whispering questions I couldn't answer. The noise of his voice in my head, saying those words over and over, each time with that too real smile. The noise of hope, which had once been a quiet, buried thing, now loud enough to drown me. And then there was the noise between us. The pauses that weren't really pauses, the jokes that weren't just jokes, the way the air seemed to thrum whenever we were alone together. One night, a few weeks after that night, we ended up on his couch again. We'd ordered pizza, watched some dumb movie neither of us paid attention to, and fallen into one of those stretches of silence that only happens when you're with someone you know too well. He had his feet up on the coffee table, one arm draped over the back of the couch, close enough that if I leaned just a little, my shoulder would touch his chest. My whole body was humming with the nearness of him, and I hated myself for how badly I wanted something to happen. Something small, something huge, anything. "Do you ever think about it?" he asked suddenly. I turned to look at him. "Think about what?" He shrugged. "The future. Like where we'll end up. Who we'll end up with." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Sometimes. Yeah." He smiled faintly, like he was letting me in on a secret. "Me too." I waited. My heart was in my ears. But he didn't say anything more. Just stared at the ceiling, drumming his fingers against the couch cushion, lost in his own thoughts. I wanted so badly to ask, to press, to say, "When you said that thing about us getting married, did you mean it? Even just a little?" But I didn't. I let the silence swallow the moment, and it slipped away like water through my hands. That became the pattern. Near confessions, half jokes, lingering touches that could mean everything or nothing. I'd lie awake at night replaying them, dissecting every glance, every smile, every word. Was he testing me? Was he waiting for me to admit something first? Or was I just a fool, building castles out of shadows? It would have been easier if he were cruel, if he gave me nothing to hold on to. But Ryan wasn't cruel. He was kind in that effortless way that made you feel like you mattered. He noticed things. If I was quiet, he'd ask if something was wrong. If I laughed too hard, he'd grin like he was proud of himself for making me happy. He made me feel seen in a way no one else ever had. And then, just when I thought maybe, just maybe, I wasn't imagining it, something would shatter the illusion. Like the night we went to a party together. He disappeared for a while, and when I finally found him, he was in the kitchen, pressed against some girl I didn't know, his hands on her waist, her lips on his neck. He saw me across the room, and for a split second his eyes locked on mine. My stomach dropped, but I forced a smile, forced a laugh, forced myself to look away before he could see the truth in my face. The next morning he didn't mention it, and neither did I. But inside, I was unraveling. The push and pull of it was exhausting. Hope and heartbreak, on a loop that never stopped. And the worst part? He didn't even know what he was doing to me. Or maybe he did and he didn't know what it meant. Or maybe he knew exactly what it meant and didn't want to face it. One night, it all came to a head. We were walking home from a bar. The streets quiet, our footsteps echoing in the cool night air. He was a little drunk, laughing too loudly, bumping into me as we walked. At one point, his hand brushed mine, and then didn't move away. I froze. My heart pounded. And for the first time, I didn't pull back. I let our hands linger, not quite holding, not quite not. He glanced at me, his smile softer now, his eyes unreadable. "You know," he murmured, voice lower than usual. "Sometimes I think, if things were different." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. My whole body ached with the weight of it. I wanted to grab his hand, to stop in the middle of the street and tell him everything. That I didn't want different. I wanted this. Him. But before I could, he laughed it off, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Forget it," he said. "I'm talking nonsense." And just like that, the moment was gone. I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, my chest heavy with all the words I couldn't say. I thought about the way he'd smiled when he said we should get married. I thought about his hand brushing mine. I thought about all the almosts, all the maybes, all the could-bests that never became anything more. It felt like living in a ghost story, haunted not by what had happened, but by what almost did. And yet, even through the ache, even through the constant heartbreak, I couldn't let go of the hope, because as much as it hurt, there was still that smile, that one too real smile. And as long as I remembered it, I couldn't help but imagine. Imagine if we got married. Imagine if the jokes weren't jokes. Imagine if the almost turned into something real.
Immagine.
Hope can be a dangerous thing. It feeds you just enough to keep you alive, but it never fills you. It leaves you hungry, restless, chasing scraps. That's what it was like with Ryan. Every smile, every glance, every almost, those were my scraps. Enough to keep me holding on, but never enough to satisfy me. And yet I couldn't walk away. It wasn't just about wanting him. It was about needing him. Ryan wasn't just a crush or some fantasy I could outgrow. He was my best friend. The person I told everything to, everything except the one truth that mattered most. The one truth that could break us. And so I stayed, caught between the comfort of what we had and the ache of what we didn't. There was one night, though, when the line between the two blurred so much I almost forgot which side I was on. We were at his apartment again. A storm had knocked the power out, so we lit a couple of candles and sat on the floor, talking the way we always did when the world outside disappeared. He poured us whiskey, the good kind he usually saved for special occasions. We drank slowly, the amber liquid warming our throats as the rain beat against the windows. At some point, the conversation drifted to relationships again. I don't remember how. We never planned these things. They just happened naturally the way everything did with him. "You ever think about what your wedding would be like?" he asked suddenly. The question hit me like a punch. I laughed, trying to keep it light. "Not really. Why, you planning mine for me?" He smirked. "Maybe. I think you'd want something simple. Nothing too flashy. Just small, intimate, with the right person." My chest tightened. The right person. I wanted to ask if he thought he knew who that person was. I wanted to ask if he was picturing himself when he said it. Instead, I shrugged. "Sounds about right." Then he leaned back, sipping his drink, his eyes catching the flicker of the candlelight. "Imagine if we got married." The words hung in the air, heavier this time, weighted with something that didn't feel like a joke at all. I froze. My breath caught. My pulse hammered in my throat. He smiled, but it wasn't the playful grin he wore when he was teasing. It was softer, realer. The kind of smile you can't fake, not even if you try. And in that moment, the world tilted. Because I saw it. I saw us. Not just in some fantasy in my head, but in the way he looked at me, in the way the silence between us wasn't awkward but full. Full of possibility. I wanted to reach for him. I wanted to close the space between us, to say yes, imagine it, because I do all the time. But I didn't. Couldn't. Fear held me back. The fear of shattering everything, of losing the one person I couldn't bear to lose. So instead, I laughed softly, forcing my voice to stay steady. "You really like that joke, don't you?" He looked at me for a long moment, something unreadable in his eyes. Then he smiled again, this time lighter, safer. "Yeah.
Guess I do."
And just like that, the moment was gone. But I couldn't forget it. I couldn't forget the way his voice softened when he said those words. I couldn't forget the way his smile felt too real, too genuine to be a joke. And from then on, every time he laughed with me, every time his hand brushed mine, every time he looked at me just a little too long, I wondered. I wondered if he felt it too, if he was just as scared as I was, if we were both trapped in the same silence. The thing about hope is it grows. It doesn't care if it's fed by truth or illusion. It takes root and it spreads until it's all you can see. I started imagining it more often. Not just late at night when I was alone, but in the middle of the day, in the middle of conversations with him. I'd catch myself watching his mouth as he talked, wondering what it would feel like to kiss him. I'd picture us years from now, living together, waking up side by side, building a life. Sometimes, I'd catch him looking at me, and I'd wonder if he was imagining it too. But the problem with building a life in your head is that it never matches reality. Because reality was messy. Reality was him dating other people. Reality was him disappearing into bedrooms at parties with girls whose names I didn't know. Reality was me standing there, smiling like it didn't hurt, while my chest burned with a jealousy I had no right to feel. Reality was the silence between us, thick with all the words neither of us said. There was one night, though, when I almost broke. We were sitting on the roof of his building, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. He had a cigarette between his fingers, the smoke curling into the cool night air. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" he asked suddenly. I glanced at him, my heart stuttering. "Different how?" He took a drag, exhaled slowly. "I don't know. Just, if life had gone another way. If we'd made different choices." He didn't look at me when he said it, but his voice was soft, thoughtful. And in that moment I almost said it. I almost told him everything. That I thought about it every day. That I wanted things to be different. That I wanted us. But then he stubbed out his cigarette, leaned back, and grinned. "Guess that's just how life is. Huh? What ifs?" And the moment slipped away again. I went home that night and sat in the dark, my chest aching with everything I couldn't say. I hated myself for staying silent. I hated myself for being too afraid. But most of all, I hated that no matter how much it hurt, I still couldn't let go of the hope. Because his smile, his too real smile, still lived in me. And as long as it did, I couldn't stop imagining. Imagine if we got married. Imagine if the what-ifs weren't what-ifs. Imagine if he meant it. There's a cruel thing about memory. It doesn't ask for permission before it shows up. It doesn't care if you're ready or if you've tried to bury it. It comes back when it wants to. For me, it was always that smile. The one he wore when he said, "Imagine if we got married." The way his eyes softened. The way his voice dipped. Not playful, not sarcastic, but something else. Something dangerous. And no matter how many times reality reminded me otherwise, that memory returned. Sometimes in the middle of a lecture, sometimes when I was walking home, sometimes when I was lying awake at night with my chest tight. It was like a haunting, except the ghost wasn't dead. He was still alive, still in my life, still laughing with me, calling me at 2 a.m., making plans for the weekend, still brushing against me in ways that made me wonder if it was an accident or something more. I didn't know how much longer I could take it. The breaking point came one summer evening. We'd been drinking again. Beer this time on his balcony, the humid air heavy around us. Music drifted from inside, low and steady, but the world out there felt far away. It was just us. He leaned against the railing, looking out at the darkening sky. "Do you ever think about forever?" he asked suddenly. I frowned. "Forever?" "Yeah." He turned to me, eyes catching mine in the fading light. "Like who you'll end up with. Who's gonna stick by you when everything else falls apart?" The question hit me in the chest. My first instinct was to deflect like I always did, to laugh, to shrug, to keep it safe. But I was tired of being safe, tired of holding it in. So I asked, softly, "Do you?" He smiled faintly, almost wistfully. "Sometimes." There was a long pause, the kind that felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down at the drop, knowing one wrong step could change everything. And then he said it again, the words that had been echoing in my head for months. "Imagine if we got married." Only this time, there was no laughter in his voice, no trace of a joke, just quiet, steady sincerity. I stared at him, my breath caught in my throat. My whole body was trembling, but I forced myself to ask, "Are you serious?" He didn't answer right away. He just held my gaze, his expression unreadable. And then slowly, softly, he smiled. That same smile, the too real one. I felt my heart crack open. For the first time, it wasn't just a fantasy in my head. It was here, alive between us. I wanted to tell him everything, that I'd imagined it 1,000 times, that I loved him, that I didn't want to just imagine. I wanted it to be real. But before I could speak, he looked away, took another swig of his beer, and just like that, the moment shifted. "Sorry," he said, his tone lighter now.
I'm drunk.
Talking nonsense again. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him by the shoulders and say, "Stop hiding. Stop pretending. You meant it. I saw it in your face." But I didn't. I laughed instead. I nodded. I let him off the hook. And once again, the truth slipped through my fingers. After that night, I started noticing something I hadn't before. Pattern. He'd say things, intimate things, things that brushed up against the line between friendship and something else. And then, the moment I got close enough to step over that line, he'd pull back. Hide behind laughter. Hide behind "just kidding." Hide behind the safety of silence. It wasn't random. It wasn't careless. It was deliberate. And that realization both terrified me and gave me hope. Because if it was deliberate, it meant he felt something too. Maybe he was just as scared as I was. Maybe he didn't know how to say it either. But how long could we keep living in this in-between? There was a girl, eventually. Of course there was. Her name was Anna. She was sweet, funny, beautiful in that effortless way that made sense for him. They started dating in the fall, and for the first time, I felt the ground really give out beneath me. He introduced her to me one evening, the three of us sitting awkwardly in his living room, and I smiled through the whole thing. I was polite, I was warm, I was exactly the friend he needed me to be. And inside I was breaking, because I kept remembering his words. "Imagine if we got married." And all I could think was, "But you're with her, not me." The worst part wasn't seeing them together. The worst part was how little changed between us. He still called me late at night. He still joked with me, touched me, smiled at me like he always had, and I still wondered, did he say those words to her too? Did he smile at her the way he smiled at me? Or was that smile, the too real one, still mine? I wish I could tell you that I found the courage then, that I pulled him aside, confessed everything, told him I couldn't keep living in the in-between. But I didn't. I stayed silent. I let the weeks blur into months, watching them grow closer, watching him slip further away from me. I kept the words locked inside, too afraid of what would happen if I spoke them out loud. And all the while, that smile haunted me. The memory of it, the possibility of it, the way it made me believe, if only for a moment, that what I wanted wasn't impossible. That maybe, somewhere deep down, he wanted it too. There's a specific kind of loneliness that comes from sitting next to the person you love while they talk about someone else. It's not the same as being ignored. It's not the same as being rejected. It's worse. It's being close enough to touch them, close enough to hear their laughter, close enough to feel their warmth, and knowing none of it belongs to you. That's what it was like being around Ryan and Anna. They weren't over the top, not the kind of couple that flaunted themselves in public. But even in their smallest gestures, her hand slipping into his, the way he looked at her when she wasn't paying attention, it was enough to gut me. And yet, he didn't stop being Ryan with me. He still called me late at night, still joked in that way that blurred the line between teasing and tenderness, still gave me those looks that felt like they meant more than they should, which only made it worse, because every time he smiled at me, I remembered that night, that too real smile, those words, "Imagine if we got married." And the more I thought about it, the more it felt like a secret I was carrying alone. A secret he had dropped into my chest, only to walk away from it, leaving me to hold its weight. The cracks really started to show one winter night. We were at his place, the three of us. Anna had gone to bed early, and it was just me and him on the couch, a movie playing in the background that neither of us were watching. He was quiet, quieter than usual. After a while, he turned to me and asked, "You ever feel like you're living two lives?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Like, the one everyone sees, the one that makes sense. And then the other one, the one you don't talk about, the one that doesn't fit." His voice was low, almost a whisper, vulnerable in a way I rarely saw from him. And I swear, For a moment I thought he was going to say it. The thing I'd been waiting years to hear. That he felt what I felt. That he wanted what I wanted. But then he shook his head, laughed softly and said, "Forget it. I'm just tired. I didn't push. I didn't dare." But the ache in my chest was unbearable. Because in that moment I knew. He was living it too. The silence. The almost. The what-ifs. He felt them. I could see it in his eyes, even if he couldn't say it out loud. And that only made it harder to stay quiet. The breaking point came a few weeks later. I don't even know what triggered it. Maybe it was the way Anna leaned against him at a party, her head on his shoulder. Maybe it was the way he kissed her without hesitation, without fear, in front of everyone. Or maybe it was just the accumulation of years of silence, pressing down until I couldn't breathe anymore. Whatever it was, I found myself blurting it out one night, the words tearing out of me before I could stop them. "Do you ever mean it?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He frowned. "Mean what? When you say those things? When you—" I swallowed hard. "When you say we should get married." For a long moment he just stared at me, his expression unreadable. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might split me in half. Then he looked away, exhaled slowly. "I shouldn't say things like that," he muttered. "That's not what I asked," I said. He hesitated. His jaw tightened. And then, so softly I almost didn't hear it, he whispered, "Sometimes." My whole body froze. Sometimes. That one word lit me on fire. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. It wasn't nothing. It was everything and nothing all at once. I wanted to grab him, to demand more, to beg him to stop hiding. But before I could, he stood up, ran a hand through his hair and said, "We shouldn't talk about this." And just like that, the door slammed shut again. After that night, things between us shifted. Subtly but undeniably. He was more careful. He didn't say things like that anymore. Didn't joke about marriage. Didn't drop those little bombs that left me reeling. It was like he'd recognized the danger of it and pulled back, building walls where there used to be windows. But even then, the truth lingered in the air between us. Because he had said it. Sometimes. And no matter how much he tried to hide behind silence, I couldn't unhear it. I carried that word with me everywhere. Sometimes. 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 It was enough to keep me tethered, even when it hurt. Enough to make me believe that maybe, just maybe, the smile I'd been holding on to all this time really had been real. But hope can only carry you so far. Because eventually, Anna wasn't just a girlfriend anymore. She became his fiancée. He told me one night over the phone, his voice bubbling with excitement. "I asked her," he said, "and she said yes." I forced myself to say congratulations. Forced myself to laugh, to sound happy, to be the friend he needed me to be. But inside I shattered. Because all at once, the hope I'd been clinging to crumbled. The smile, the words, the sometimes, all of it collapsed under the weight of reality. He wasn't going to marry me. He was going to marry her. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. I spent the weeks leading up to the wedding in a fog. Going through the motions, pretending everything was fine, while inside I was mourning something I never even had. The worst part was that he still looked at me the same way. Still called me late at night. Still smiled that too real smile. And I couldn't tell if it was my imagination anymore, or if he really did mean it once, and was just too afraid to admit it. All I knew was that I had to watch him walk down an aisle toward someone else, while the words I'd never said burned a hole in my chest. Imagine if we got married. I imagined it every day, and now I had to let it go. The morning of his wedding, I woke up with a pit in my stomach so heavy I thought it might keep me from standing. The world outside was bright, cruelly bright, as if the universe had decided it would be a perfect day. The sky was clear, the air warm, the kind of weather people pray for when they choose an outdoor ceremony. I put on my suit slowly, every movement deliberate, like I was preparing for a battle I had no chance of winning. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see myself. I saw a version of me that had spent years carrying a secret no one else could see. A version of me who was about to watch the person he loved make a promise to someone else. And yet I went. Of course I went. Because I loved him. and because he wanted me there. The ceremony was beautiful, in the way ceremonies always are when you look at them from the outside. Strings of lights draped between trees, chairs lined neatly in rows, flowers spilling color across the aisle. People smiled, laughed, took pictures. And then there was Ryan. He stood at the front in a tailored suit, his hair just slightly out of place the way it always was, his smile nervous but radiant. My chest clenched so hard I had to look away, because I'd pictured this moment 1,000 times. Except in all my versions, he was looking at me. But today he was waiting for her. When the music swelled and Anna walked down the aisle, I thought my legs might give out. She looked stunning, glowing in a way brides are supposed to glow. She was everything he'd ever said he wanted, everything he was supposed to have. And as she reached him, as he took her hands and smiled that too real smile, only this time, not at me, I felt something inside me splinter, because that smile had been mine once. At least I'd believed it was. I'd built entire worlds on it. And now, I had to watch him give it away to someone else. I don't remember much of the vows. My mind kept drifting, looping through every moment we'd shared, every almost, every maybe, every unspoken word. I thought about the night he first said it. Imagine if we got married. The way his eyes held mine. The way his smile had felt so real. And I thought about all the times after, when he'd brushed so close to the truth but pulled back before he could cross the line. I thought about the word he'd whispered once, when I asked if he ever meant it. Sometimes. And now, sometimes wasn't enough. Because this wasn't sometimes. This was forever. At the reception, I did my best to play the part. I drank. I laughed. I danced when people dragged me to the floor. I gave a toast that made everyone smile, even him. And when it was over, when the night stretched thin and the crowd began to dwindle, I found myself standing outside, staring up at the stars. I didn't hear him approach until he was beside me. "Hey!" he said softly. I turned. He was still in his suit, his tie loosened, his hair messier than it had been hours earlier. But his smile, that same too real smile, was still there. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, though the truth was burning a hole in my chest. He studied me for a moment, then looked up at the sky. "Crazy day, huh?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "Crazy." There was a long pause, the kind that felt loaded, the kind that felt like a choice. And then, without looking at me, he whispered, "You know, sometimes I wonder." My heart stopped. Wonder what? He hesitated. His jaw tightened. His eyes stayed on the stars. What it would have been like if things had been different. The world tilted. My breath caught. This was it, the thing I'd been waiting for, the thing I'd spent years imagining. But before I could speak, before I could even move, he shook his head. "Doesn't matter, though. This is how it's supposed to be." And then he smiled again, that same smile that had haunted me for years. Too real, too honest. And it broke me. I never told him. Not that night, not ever. I let him walk back inside. Let him return to his new wife. Let the moment slip away like all the others. Because he was right. This was how it was supposed to be. At least for him. But for me? For me, it was the ending of a story that had never been allowed to begin. I think about him still, sometimes. Not every day, not the way I used to. Time has dulled the edges of the ache, softened the sharpness of what I lost. But there are nights when it all comes back. Nights when I hear his laugh in my head, when I remember the weight of his hand brushing mine, when I see that smile, that too real smile. And I wonder if he still thinks about it. If he still wonders, late at night, when the world is quiet, about the life we never lived. I wonder if, sometimes, he still imagines it. Imagine if we got married. Because I still do. Even now. Even always.